Hello and welcome to Sam and Matt's 20th Century, a show where we go through the years of the 20th century to the best of our ability and pick one historical event from that year. I'm Matt.
I'm Sam.
And today is our first episode.
Yeah,
We're
prospect.
We're going to be talking about the year 1900, more specifically Paris and the World Fair. Now, to explain a little bit about the format, for each year, we take it in turns to go away, read books, research, find out fun, interesting facts for you all to listen to.
For your delectation.
And this year, the first episode, Sam is the one that's gone away, done the hard work, done the graft, the research, and he's going to be telling us all about Paris, and I'm going to be asking him questions about it, try and find out what it's all about. So, without further ado, Sam, do you want to tell me why you picked Paris? All the things you could have picked. 1900, great year.
Yeah, excellent year. Well, Paris, I suppose, is most interesting artistically in that it is, at that point, it is the birth of modern art in Paris. You have the birth of Cubism, birth of Fauvism, the Impressionists have barely left, Symbolism's at its peak, Art Nouveau. You know, these are all, huge artistic terms. They're all very Paris-centred. But also because it's quite tragic with hindsight, historically speaking, in that it had only just started to recover and truly become this very modern, very advanced city, with the metro and stuff. But it's only 14 years away from World War One, and that just is devastating for France. Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about the run-up? You refer to it as quite a modern city with all these art movements. Do you want to talk about the run-up, what happened in the 1800s, why Paris is in the position that it is in come 1900?
Basically, since the French Revolution, France had a long history of misrule, which is quite damning, but quite apt, because obviously after the French Revolution you have the Terror, lots of people die, and then... Well, if this episode was about the Terror, I would expand and elaborate. But I think the name says it all, really. Yeah. And then, so that leads to the Second Republic, which was very short-lived and relatively corrupt. Again, very damning summary of that, but...
It's all you need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that leads to Napoleon III, who, in some senses, was a good leader.
And who is Napoleon III?
So? Oh, well... he's not the Napoleon you've heard of, Matthew. He is Napoleon's nephew. So Napoleon III comes to power in 1848. He's a politician in the Second Republic, and he's actually, because he's been living in Switzerland, all of the Bonapartes get exiled, and he tries to come into France twice before he eventually gets in. But both times he comes at the head of a band of mercenaries and gets banished.
Never works out well.
Yeah. So he
once tried to crash a party like that.
That's, less said about that, the better. But he eventually gets in. He comes to power and he declares himself emperor quite soon after that. He ingeniously...
Oh, them Napoleons.
Yeah, well, power-hungry family. Although, do you get surviving Bonapartes now?
Not that I've heard of.
No, but there must be distant relatives.
Yeah, but
so I don't think you can insult their whole bloodline.
It's like when you look for the, current day successor to some English monarchical tree, line of the family tree, and it turns out they're like a turkey farmer somewhere in Norfolk, and it's all a bit disappointing.
So you think there's just floods of illegitimate Bonaparte children
just doing sort of boring, mundane work somewhere? Why not?
I just hope none of them are listening in that case. The Bonaparte listenership, that was a key contingent. We've lost them all.
Oh, no.
Anyway.
Key demographic.
So Napoleon III.
Yes.
Back to the topic at hand. He ingeniously, puts in place universal male suffrage.
Okay.
While cementing all the power in his own hands.
And so this is... When did this happen? When did the universal
mid 1850s?
So that's quite progressive. Genuinely universal.
But it's a tyranny. The vote means nothing. Is the point? There's a Bonapartist party, but it's obviously horribly rigged. He funnily enough stays in power for a very long time.
Funny that.
So his downfall is in 1870 and the Franco-Prussian War. I'm conscious of spending quite a lot of time in
Doesn't matter,
in the middle of the wrong century. In the Franco-Prussian War, there's a thing called the EMS, maybe EMS, so maybe a silent S, dispatch, which is sent from Bismarck to France and is translated badly, essentially. So Napoleon III takes insult at it. But it's very flimsy cause for war, is the point.
Okay.
He perceives an insult inside that really isn't there.
Okay.
And marches off to Berlin and gets absolutely trounced by Prussia. It's a really humiliating defeat.
That's why they call him the Iron Chancellor.
Oh, yeah. And just the Germans were more efficient. They had these shiny new rifles that I forget the name of.
Something to do with carbine rifling.
Yeah, something. And they besiege Paris. You have the people of Paris eating rats to survive because there are German troops camped outside them. And it's very humiliating because France had assumed she had all this political and military power. And
all this clout on the world stage. So Napoleon was lying to himself a bit when he said, "Oh, I'm going to use this flimsy excuse to go to war, and this is going to end great, and I'm going to get loads of popularity."
Because he'd had the Crimean War beforehand, which is obviously done somewhat cack-handedly by the powers of Europe.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, well, what was we looked at some statistics about it. Like 80,000 dying of disease.
Twice the number of troops were lost to the weather and disease than were lost to enemy action and that kind of stuff. And it was just quite poorly organised. But to ignore all that circumstantial stuff, it was a victory. They did win.
And it was France participating with the rest of Europe successfully. And if you go back before then, France had either been the subject of invasions by the rest of Europe at the time of the revolution,
it was either the weak man of Europe,
or being the bully under Napoleon Bonaparte,
and sort of running around the place, causing everyone to get very upset
and seizing all sorts of territory. So that leads on then from 1870 onwards. France becomes a republic. It becomes the Third Republic,
a proper one this time.
Yeah. But it's...
Did they keep the universal suffrage that Bonaparte brought in?
Don't think so, but possibly.
Okay. But it is certainly more of a democracy.
But actually, no, you think surely they would keep it, because it'd be hard to take that away from a population,
But I mean, if it's a new republic, then it might be a new constitution and stuff.
Well, they don't create a constitution, is the thing. But what happens is, lots of people assume that they're just going to become another monarchy.
Okay.
The one thing they're sure they don't want is Bonapartism. They don't want another member of that family. That's gone wrong too many times. But, there is this guy, the Comte de Chambord.
Check out you, Mr. French GCSE.
Well, I'm probably going to murder lots more pronunciations in the
coming
coming minutes. And we're going to get hordes of complaints. Or actually, no, because that implies someone will listen. But anyway, so Comte de Chambord, the monarchist claimant, and he has all this support, but he refuses to accept the tricolor, the French national flag as we now know it, because he wants to have the old flag of the Bourbon monarchy, which is just plain white. But he refuses to accept that, and public opinion, broadly speaking, turns against him. And we have this... It's not even a bill, it's an amendment to a bill in 1870 what?
1870 something.
I'm frantically searching through papers here. 1875.
This is an annual point in the sort of show to very much make out that we're working from paper. We've both, when it comes to my episode, we both have extensive quantities of notes that we're sort of rifling through.
Well, certainly for these first two episodes, we're working off what were intended to be lectures.
So originally, the sort of idea behind the show was that we were going to write a script that would be sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes long, somewhere in that region, and then just reel it off. Do it by rote.
I mean, we do it a disservice. These were very well written lectures.
They were phenomenal.
They were funny and articulate and just highly informative.
So just beautiful pieces of prose. But sadly, we both hate the sound of our own voices.
Yes,
and we both hate the idea of having to sit on our own, reeling off word perfect scripts.
And also, this is a team effort, and it's nice. It's nice to be in the studio, or rather the basement, with with Matt here.
rather than being totally insular in our production. So it's much, and we think, somewhat naively probably, that listening to us have a conversation about something historical is more interesting and we're going to get more sort of intriguing, fact-based fun out of it than simply reeling off a script.
It's more difficult to go off on one, isn't it, when you've got someone to talk to and talk at.
Yeah, so I can shut down Sam's more rambly, nonsense-based.
And vice versa, I hasten to add.
Yeah.
So, 1875 was the date we were looking for, and they were become a republic by 353 votes to 352. I just think that's just a phenomenal statistic.
So a margin of one.
Yeah, obviously Napoleon III is the last emperor king of France. From that point on, France is a republic. The Third Republic itself falls, I think, obviously with German occupation in the Second World War, and you get the resistance and the Vichy
France.
But it lasted an awful long time,
considering that it's something basically set up because they don't want another Napoleon.
Yeah, and something that was only meant to be there by one vote.
Yeah. Oh man, can you imagine if that one guy last minute changed your heart?
Yeah, changed his mind, went for the Comte de Chambord. Although would that have changed very much? Discuss.
Oh, discuss. Anywho, moving on towards 1900.
We've been talking about how unstable this Third Republic was, because that's what's in place by 1900, and it's relatively well established. But there's a lot to be said for how mixed up a political system it was. We've got just some things to talk about here, like the clash between the left and right. So in 1893, we will get to 1900 eventually.
I mean, it is kind of the name of the podcast and everything, but it's fine.
Yeah. But 1890, rather, only 10 years off. You have the first celebration of Labour Day in France, and you have, I think it's 100,000 workers in Paris against, in breach of their contracts, take a holiday on Labour Day. And obviously it's this great statement towards international working men's rights.
When you say take a holiday, you mean don't turn up to work?
Well, yeah, but in a celebration of Labour and...
Labour Day, okay, cool.
And international socialism and whatever else. But at the same time as these successes for socialism, you have this guy, General Boulanger.
Oh, what a name.
Yeah.
I remember that word from my year 8 French classes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like being called Smith, isn't it? Or
yeah.
Taylor.
Baker.
Yeah, Baker.
Yeah, Tom Baker.
Matt Baker.
Think of all the famous bakers.
There are a lot of famous bakers.
Fair enough.
So General Boulanger is this... He sort of fancies himself as another Napoleon, but he's not that clever. He doesn't have that level of political nous. Like, he doesn't have the level of political nous to give people universal male suffrage while taking all the power for himself, which is just an all-round clever move.
But that's not what Mr. Baker was like.
Mr. Boulanger.
Sorry.
Let's not insult the poor man. Well, he was very popular. He had a lot of followers. He called for things like restarting war with Germany.
That went really well the first time,
because it was a cause of great, anger and resentment amongst the French population. They wanted to get back at Germany.
So for more kind of background, one of the things that they lost at the end of the Franco-Prussian War was Alsace-Lorraine.
Yeah, the regions of Alsace and Lorraine, which are later taken back by France at the Treaty of Versailles. Which is really one
of the main things that Hitler gets
so worked up about,
riled up about in the run-up to World War II.
Yeah, so there's a really salient point and comparison to be made between these two treaties. So the treaty made at the end of the Franco-Prussian War it's made by an exacting foreign power, newly victorious, with lots of strength, lots of sabre rattling, and it's agreed to by a government that's been thrown together that no one expects to survive. Only instead of the Weimar government in Germany, which is the comparison point, which falls, very quickly to Nazism,
the Third Republic will be around.
will last for a long, long time.
And I suppose another flaw in the argument, I mean, you can correct me if this is wrong, but the Franco-Prussian War was nowhere near the kind of devastation.
Oh yeah, not nearly as cataclysmically horrible for France as the First World War. Sorry, for France as the First World War was for France and Germany.
Germany as well. But there is certainly a through line there, and I think it is interesting that these two little regions in whether you define it as Eastern France or Western Germany.
Yeah, they speak both languages.
Get sort of chopped and changed around so consistently through sort of a good 2 or 3 conflicts.
So naturally, to go back to France at the time, there's a lot of ill feeling, and that's what Boulanger, capitalises on. And that's, he had enough support, really, for him to have marched on Parliament, maybe created a government of his own. But instead he gets attacked by the left in speeches, and they persuade the government to charge him with treason. And he flees to Belgium and eventually commits suicide in 1891 over the grave of his dead mistress.
Oh, goodness me.
Yeah.
Interesting man.
Well, yeah, but the point being there was a lot of political discontent and clashing from between the left and right, and in 1893 there is a bomb thrown at the session chairman of the Chamber of Deputies. And there's this fantastic anecdote because he then just continues with the speech. He ducks the bomb hits the wall, explodes, and then he just gets back up and carries on speaking.
Oh, wow. That is quite impressive. Well, wasn't it, I think maybe Roosevelt got shot once and just carried on giving a speech, got shot.
This is Theodore, I assume.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Teddy Roosevelt once, this might entirely be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there is a president of Roosevelt's ilk that was shot during a speech and just continued to give the speech for the last
the American way, isn't it?
Rounded up the speech and then got taken off to hospital.
That's fantastic. So the other thing we need to highlight, I think, in terms of detailing what France was like and what emotional baggage Paris had, is the Paris Commune of 1871.
Okay, what is that?
So it's just after the Franco-Prussian War, and obviously the people of Paris are not very happy about this new government, making a deal with the Germans.
When are they happy?
Well, the people of Paris. Let's just refrain from making any comment about the emotional makeup of the people of Paris.
But I mean, this is a commune in very much the same light as the Paris Commune during the French Revolution.
Well, in that it's beleaguered and it's thrown together and it's ultimately leads to much bloodshed.
Interesting.
But so it's a small government force gets sent to Paris to disarm the Paris National Guard.
French government.
Yeah. This new Third Republic government that no one really knows anything about yet.
So this is after the end of the Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah.
When this sort of Weimar-like weak national body has managed to, get a peace treaty, bring France back into sort of a state of peace. And they've sent a group of soldiers to Paris
to make sure they don't do any funny business.
And what happens then?
Well, instead, this force that's been sent to disarm the Paris National Guard is attacked by the Paris National Guard. Yes, and from that point on, there was no going back. They declare their own government. A government force gets sent, led by this guy Marshal MacMahon, who is actually a Frenchman, but I think he's of Irish descent, hence the name. And he's a future president of France.
But sort of the point behind the Commune is that Paris, as a force within the nation of France, is independent,
fiercely
strong-willed,
independent.
Doesn't really see it sets itself apart.
I mean, originally in the script for the lecture, I have a bit where I digress and I get a historian to back me up in my assertion that the people of Paris were fiercely independent.
Do you want to read the quote? From the historian.
Yeah. Well, this is from Vincent Cronin, who wrote this book, Paris on the Eve, which is fantastic. I highly recommend it, except then, this achievement will seem much less impressive. But he says, Marseille, Bordeaux, Nantes felt the need to have friendly relations with neighbours or nearby overseas nations, but Paris wished to outdo, to excel, and, if necessary, to throw her weight about. In many ways, Paris was more narrow-minded than the provincial cities, and certainly more self-centred.
Okay.
So that's why you get this very Paris-centric revolution all the way back when, and that's why you get this commune, but ultimately it's very easily defeated, and I think 100,000 people die.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, well, that's the upper reach estimate. Then you get people who flee, because all the communards are obviously wanted men and women post it's being defeated.
So, shall we move on to the meat of the day?
The exposition.
Talk about the the actual exhibition itself,
Yeah.
the World Fair. What is a World Fair, Sam?
Well, I think we still have them, don't we? We certainly have expositions to this day. These sort of
Yeah.
meaningless events that where a city or a country gets to show off, and
Yes.
it's a justification for the rest of the world to visit and spend money, and for the hosts to show off their technological development. Okay,
So, Paris.
Yeah, so the exhibition is amazingly humongous. It is enormous. The 51 million people who come to Paris are the most people to come to World's Fair until Osaka in 1971.
So that's 71
a
years
70-year
later.
unbroken record of...
The biggest World Fair ever.
So it might seem a little bit quaint with hindsight in terms of what's on show, but it's so... there's such range, such grandeur. It's ludicrously impressive, really, even with our jaded modern day eyes. Just
Do you
to
want to
reel off some of the
give some
things.
examples of what was on show?
So you've got these foreign pavilions, which are brought by foreign nations, and you get things like you get a facsimile of the Kremlin. There's an English manor house, especially built, a Bulgarian cottage, a German castle, and there's a model of the US Capitol as well. So these are all, humongous structures along the riverbank that people can peruse. There's a site where somebody's created like 3D models of what they thought they might have looked like, and you can zoom through them.
Oh, wow.
You might be able to get a link for that, yeah.
Like, that may well come in some kind of a show description.
Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. And another very, very defining aspect of it is the technological side.
Okay.
So there is this cinema in the round. So obviously cinema is still very new and obviously very, very French as well.
Yeah, but a young art form.
Yeah, and there's this cinema in the round with 10 synchronized projectors.
And 10 screens
going
around. So you stand in the middle, you look out, and it's a full film.
And then obviously you've got cars, hot air balloons. People are proposing flying machines. And again, the people who come to the plane are French.
Wait, what?
No, they're not.
No, they're not. They're Americans.
It's the Wright brothers.
The Wright brothers.
Who are the people? Who is it? What does the Frenchman do?
The Frenchman.
It's two French brothers do cinema.
But there's also French people that are the first to fly somewhere. They're the first to do a flying thing. Anyway.
Yeah. They definitely. Anyway, the point being, France is technological. Paris is technological, and it's hip and happening, and they're very, they're ahead of the curve. What else have you got? You've got phonographs, where Oscar Wilde, who dies that year but has been living in Paris,
exiled after sort of the disgrace of his imprisonment and general. Oh.
Well, because obviously homosexuality is not very well dealt with, or indeed legal in Britain at that time. But so he's living in Paris, and he goes to these phonographs and is said to have recorded part of the Ballad of Reading Jail, which is a poem of his, at these machines.
On the phonographs at the World Fair. That's an important thing.
So, but the overhanging technological aspect of the World's Fair is the Paris Metro.
Okay.
Which is... there were other underground systems in place by this time. London, the London Underground has been around since 1863. New York has one in 1872.
Okay.
But Paris eventually catches up, and 17 million journeys were made in the second half of that year alone, which is
quite impressive.
And that's not even. I remember reading that's not thought to include all the people who didn't bother buying tickets. But no,
so it's just 17 million tickets sold on the Metro in the first year.
Outrageous sales, yeah. So I've got here
the other big thing that sort of dominated the Paris skyline to this day, of course,
from that era,
is the Eiffel Tower,
which was not nearly as well received as the Metro. The Metro, you get sort of tentative agreement by the Parisian population because they accept that they need it. That horse and carts won't really cut it when you've got 51 million people coming to Paris. But there is this astonishing public petition written against the Eiffel Tower, which was built for France's last World's Fair in 1887, again in Paris. It seems ridiculous these days, the opposition people had to the Eiffel Tower.
It is such an iconic building, and it's so... You think of Paris and you think of the Eiffel Tower. they are so interlinked in
Yeah,
the sort of
These
modern
days we
idea
just
of
accept
what
it.
Paris is, but it was not that well received.
Well, this is an 1887 public petition signed by Alexandre Dumas, a Guy de Maupassant, and it reads
Sorry,
thusly.
that's Dumas as in the one what wrote The Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
Okay.
But here we go. This petition reads: "The Eiffel Tower, which even money-grubbing America, we can be certain, would not want, is the dishonour of Paris. Everyone knows that, everyone says it, and everyone is profoundly upset. And we are only the weak echo of the universal public opinion, which is rightly alarmed. One has only to imagine a vertiginously ridiculous tower dominating Paris, like a gigantic black factory chimney, crushing by its barbarous massiveness Notre Dame, the Sainte-Chapelle, the Tower of Saint-Jacques, the Louvre, the Arc de Triomphe. All of our humiliated monuments will disappear in this ghastly dream, and for 20 years we shall see stretching like a blot of ink the hateful shadow of the hateful column of bolted sheet metal." It is just astonishing how riled up people got. But then it seems justifiable considering how much change Paris had undergone.
Yeah, if you think going from the city that is like defeated by the Franco-Prussian War, and the city that is sort of like the sick man of Europe, as it were, the country that is behind from a military and a political perspective, suddenly being shot forward into the 20th century, sort of leading the world in a great many things all of a sudden.
Yeah. Although it's worth pointing out that it was a subject of... It was quite a touchy subject in France, that the real scientific breakthroughs were being made by the Germans.
Flipping Germans.
But we don't talk about that. And obviously, Marie Curie is working somewhere.
Marie Curie wasn't French.
Was she not French?
No, I'm pretty sure she was like Polish. Am I wrong?
Pause the recording. And obviously, Marie Curie, who, as we have discovered, is Polish but naturalised French, is working somewhere in France and will eventually be awarded the Nobel Prize. So France is, you're right, is at the forefront of things. But, I mean, you're wrong to say since the Franco-Prussian War, because actually a lot of the change had been under Haussmannisation. Have you come
What
across
on
this term?
earth could that possibly be, Sam? Why don't you tell the nice people?
Well, Matthew. Haussmannisation is so named because it was mostly the work of Baron Haussmann, who was never technically awarded a baronetship, but he was given the honour.
He just called himself a baron.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
So he's well in with Napoleon III, and they label themselves physician urbanists. So what Haussmann is all about is
That is not a pretentious term in any shape or form, is it?
I mean, but it works.
Can you just have that again? Physician urbanists.
Yes.
Okay.
But he's all about the provision of green spaces in amidst all these, medieval streets, and about, long, straight roads, and about symmetry, about new symmetrical buildings. But, I mean, he was much opposed at the time, but for better or for worse, he is modern Paris. That's what we recognise as Paris today.
When you think in your mind of things like the Champs-Élysées, I can't do a French accent.
The Champs-Élysées?
That one.
Yeah.
That one there. And all those beautiful sort of Parisian rooftops and
that is
green spaces.
I mean, just to give
the city. So think of like a corny rom-com set in Paris. All that nice backdrop wouldn't be there if not for this man, Mr. Haussmann.
Mr. Haussmann, as we now have termed him. He left Notre Dame isolated, because Notre Dame obviously is on this island in the middle of the city. Before it was surrounded by sort of quite Victorian tenement housing. What else does he do? He expands these boulevards, which since Louis XIV have been like Paris's biggest roads. And he expands them into avenues and stuff that we still use today. And he also commissions the refurbishment of the Gare du Nord, the station in the north of Paris, and turns it into this sort of, central bulwark of Parisian transport. Okay,
so he does a lot of good stuff in architecturally speaking. Was he as hated at the time for his change as like things like the Eiffel Tower, or did his changes go down
as the Eiffel Tower? I mean, artists were initially sort of okay with it. Obviously, these are grand sweeping generalizations, but they do sort of turn against him as his projects go on, as he requires more and more funding. Renoir called Paris's new buildings cold and lined up like soldiers at review. Pizarro, when he meant to imply bad taste, would describe things as worthy of the epoch of the Eiffel Tower. Certainly by the time we get to 1900 and our topic, he is quite roundly opposed. And people get quite sentimental about old asymmetrical Paris.
All that old sort of...
Yeah.
The tight streets and the tall...
And they don't like all these new open square designs, and design in Art Nouveau starts to swerve away from that rigidity, and Art Nouveau is very swirly and about metalwork.
Interesting.
Patterns. But I mean, that's what Paris was really at that point. Was to go back to how we started, it's a city of modernity.
Yeah, and so that kind of those open spaces, those symmetrical lines, those very kind of rigid, structured, planned...
Yeah, and with an underground to fit it.
Cities.
That's what we think of as natural for metropolis.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly,
today.
If you compare that with your kind of turn-of-the-century image of Victorian London...
Yeah, which is the complete opposite.
Literally the complete opposite of that. You think of the smog, you think of the slums.
Pea supers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually more reminiscent of sort of America, isn't it? In terms of the influences there of the symmetry, the green spaces, the much more open kind of city plan is certainly something that is somewhat American in its leaning.
Yeah. But I think that if we're going to start to wrap up and conclude, that's what is worth taking away about Paris at that time, is that it was modern, it was genuinely groundbreaking. Yeah. And it was just really perilously... It was going to be very short-lived because of the First World War oncoming. In the background, as historians, if I can call ourselves that, looking at those with an interest in history.
Yeah, absolutely. So you look at this great modernising force with this World Fair that attracts 51 million visitors.
Yeah.
All these renewals, the art, the architecture, all of this new shiny stuff that's happening, and just 14 years down the line it's going to be
ripped to
all
shreds.
but wiped out in the course of the First World War, and it's going to happen again another sort of 30 years later, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that is what I think the study of Europe in this period amounts to, isn't it? Is you can't help but see it through the lens of everything that's going to go wrong.
Yeah, all of the two world wars that are going to come all too quickly.
And again, skipping forward to the episode we're preparing for now, the episodes in that I'm starting to thinking about 1902, and Matt's starting to think about 1903. I've been researching the Marquess of Salisbury, who was the British Prime Minister for the last time in 1902, and he is, in this period, while France is undergoing this change, the Belle Epoque, is signing the treaties and stuff that will make World War One happen as it does. You can't help but see what all these agreements will lead to.
And I suppose that is somewhat sad sort of conclusion of this era, is that it is so overshadowed by what comes next, which is a shame, because so much cool stuff, like the invention of cinema and discovery, sort of the invention of flying machines, all this amazing hope-filled, the modernisation, the art, the architecture, all of this full of hope and life and progress is going to be totally wiped out by what comes 13, 14 years later.
And on that note...
Oh dear,
I think
that was a little bit too depressing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for listening to the first ever episode of Sam and Matt's 20th Century.
By all means, flick on to the second, if it exists.
If it ever exists. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.